Hi, welcome to TWC Soundbites. I'm absolutely delighted that for this episode, I've been joined by Dawood Pervez, Managing Director of Bestway Wholesale. Dawood, hi.
Hi, Tanya.
Thank you so much for doing this. I keep saying that everybody who's doing this is taking time out of massively busy schedules, but of course you absolutely are, so thank you, I really appreciate it.
Pleasure.
Okay, so I guess you've kind of been on my radar for this series, to be perfectly honest, because I've been aware throughout this that with so many depots, particularly within the M25, you have had some of the toughest operational and logistical challenges to battle, certainly through the early stages. We saw the Channel 4 dispatches programme and it looked exceptionally busy. So can you just paint a picture, because obviously none of us have been able to visit, what it's been like for you at Bestway?
Thank you. In relation to the Channel 4 dispatches video, that was relatively early on, and you know, it was immensely busy, and I would say yes, it was immensely busy, and actually it is still very busy indeed. You know, consumers across the UK have turned to their local convenience stores for help, especially those who are clinically shielded or vulnerable, and many people who could go out to shop for food have not felt comfortable with heading to, you know, large multiple retailer stores. We've seen an overnight shift in increased footfall through independent retailers who've struggled to keep up with demand, and in turn, even as the largest independent wholesaler in the UK, we have had empty shelves at points and had to negotiate hard with our suppliers who've been under immense pressure from all sides. The team at Bestway have really risen to the challenge. I cannot speak highly enough of the commitment and dedication we've seen from the team and those retailers that work with us. I have to say they've become a valuable lifeline within their own communities. I believe that there are lessons to be learned from the last 3 months, you know, not least, you know, about the just-in-time supply chains that mults operate, but also whether there are going to be long-lasting impacts on independent retail, positive impacts.
Yeah, absolutely. And you've actually just touched on the thing I wanted to ask you next, which a number of wholesalers, but particularly when I interviewed Greg Suschenia from Parfits, he talked about the real struggle that they've had with getting the right stock on shelf in the depot, let alone to the retailer, and that they've had mixed response from suppliers. What would your view be to this? How has Bestway found it?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, yeah, you know, supply chain has been adversely impacted. You know, it's been enormously difficult in these extraordinary circumstances where everyone, you know, is turning to historic business models and thinking on their head. You know, you've seen some great heartwarming stories where everyone's working for the greater good in a way that's been unprecedented and unheard of. I think no one could have anticipated what happened, and the supply chain has certainly worked incredibly hard to try and keep everyone kind of happy. It is a simple fact that if demand doubles or more than doubles overnight, it's going to be a problem. I think one of the key things I've been doing a lot of is effectively lobbying DEFRA so that they understand about the specific channel that services independent retail. I think it's you know, it's really important to understand that I think in the 2019 local shop report from the ACS, there are about 46,000 stores in the UK convenience sector. I know it's called convenience sector. It's probably better to call it local store sector now. And they employ about 400,000 people, and they generate sales of over 40 billion. And, you know, I've mentioned already how convenience stores are undoubtedly a lifeline to thousands of communities and millions of customers. And they've been even more essential under these current government guidelines of social distancing. And, you know, fundamentally, it's really, really important for manufacturers to understand the uplifts in certain categories have been far, far higher in this channel than they have been in other channels. And pre-COVID profiles were less relevant going forward. And actually, people need to ration the stock out as fairly as possible. Sorry, suppliers have to ration the stock out as fairly as possible to the different channels. So I've been, you know, working very hard with senior members of many of the suppliers teams. I've also been talking to DEFRA about it, trying to get their assistance. I think on the whole, I think people have understood the situation and are trying to respond. The only problem is they're responding under extreme circumstances, which obviously is not necessarily as fast as we would all like.
Okay. So some challenges, but the intentions are good. It's just taking a lot to get there.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. There's no doubting anyone's intentions in these circumstances.
Yeah. Coming back to Bestway and your staff, again, I guess coming back particularly from my perspective of the number of staff you have within the M25 area. So logistically, from a self-isolating perspective, particularly at the heart of the pandemic, if you like, in those first sort of 3 to 4 weeks, how did you cope with staff that needed to self-isolate? And have you found that the industry has come together on this issue? And, you know, how did you cope?
I think when you're referring back to the very early days, I think every business had to do what it had to do. We were quite lucky. We kind of had a little bit more visibility because we have the pharmacy business, and they were getting, let's say, early warnings. So we were able very early on to order a lot of laptops, check the VPN, and then when lockdown came, we'd already done all of that. We were ready to effectively vacate the head office. So Park Royal head office has literally had 5 or 6 people working in it, and we're talking about one person on reception, one person on mail, that kind of stuff. So we've got probably 5 or 6, 7,000 square foot per person at the moment in the office, which is fantastic. Of course, where we had the shielded, we obviously asked them to go home. Where we had ladies who were pregnant but were worried that they weren't going to qualify for statutory maternity pay, we made them whole and asked them to go home. Generally speaking, we've followed all the rules to the best of our capability.
Absolutely. And from an operational perspective in the depots, where I'm guessing actually you can't have 6,000 square foot per person, has it been practically possible to maintain the 2-meter distance situation, or has that been really challenging?
Actually, it's been practically possible, and it has happened. I think when we were experiencing that first few weeks of extreme spike leading to the lockdown, I think at that point it was, everyone will remember those days. Even in the multiple retailers, it was a bun fight. Lots of people in the depots, cheek and jowl, as the phrase is. But once we got clear on what was required from social distancing, the operations team did a remarkable job. They put markings down on the floor. They put guidelines up in reception. I think retailers on the whole also appreciated that. And actually what you found were some retailers came to an environment that they felt safe in, because obviously, you will only shop in an environment that you feel safe in. So I think if you were to visit one of our depots now, there's obviously restrictions on how many people we allow in. We've also said to our customers that we'd be grateful if they didn't come with a large group of people, including family members, which I think did happen in the very, very beginning. And what you'll find is it's actually quite a busy but calm environment.
I find it interesting. It seems to be the same in the retail space, that people have sort of got used to this new normal now and kind of know how to behave. It seems to have got easier.
Yeah, and of course I should add that all of our colleagues have been distributed copious amounts of PPE, and that's gloves, sanitizer, face masks, and there was a lot of confusing messages coming out, that you don't need face masks or you do need face masks. But we did it anyway, because fundamentally you've got to make your colleagues feel safe in their work environment. So we took the steps to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. And have you had to take the decision to furlough any staff members?
We have furloughed a few people who focus on trade in our business, but we do expect them to come out furlough in due course.
Right, okay. And you've mentioned this at the start of this interview, but you've highlighted the important role of the community retailer and how they've kind of re-emerged as being central to their local community. Do you think it's going to be possible for retailers to maintain this position? Do you think it's going to stick?
I think it's very hard to predict the future, but I think it's fair to say that shopping habits were already heading in a certain trajectory, and that trajectory was one of shopping more little and more local. I think also with a recession, which is yet to really bite, I think the pain's yet to come, that right now the big stores are experiencing massive basket spends, but I think that will start reducing, and I think consumers will start managing their cash flow better or tighter, as in shopping more little, more local. I do believe that independent retailers or local stores have actually seen a massive shift in format, whether it be, instead of a can of Coke, they're selling 1.5 litres, or, they're selling more multi-packs. They're selling, let's say, more what they call future consumption products, and also larger pack sizes. I do think while that isn't necessarily going to be at the level it is right now, it will certainly be increased to pre-COVID. That's for sure. And I think it's also really important, again, to remember that during the last 2 months, I would say comfortably, independent retailers have set up well over 1 million delivery slots. And that delivery lifeline, as you may know, I think roughly I think generous number would be 10% of multiple retailer turnover is delivered, but 20% of consumers are looking for a delivery solution right now. And of course, local stores have tried their best to step into the breach, and I think that's going to continue. And as that continues, habits will stick and habits will change.
Excellent. And in terms of your own retail customers, what has Bestway done to support them through this change process?
Well, of course, we already covered all the different pack sizes and pack changes that we've had to get through our supply chain and communicate to our customers. We're updating our category advice specifically on the impulse lines and providing that to our retailers. And of course, our business development teams, who are all still working, are calling our customers and giving them advice and feedback. Where we've had some supply issues, we've also been deploying the business development and sales teams into picking up the orders, ringing up the customers and giving them substitutions and alternatives, which they may have not thought of before. I think also we've been giving a lot of communication to our retailers about opportunities in relation to support from the government, opportunities, well, when I say support from the government, that whether it be rates relief or the various different loan schemes that are available to them. We've given them advice on the social distancing measures that they're expected to take. And of course, we've been advising them to make sure that to the extent possible, they should stick to price mark pack or RRP.
Yes, absolutely. And presumably you've seen some real entrepreneurialism amongst your customers. I mean, independent retailers are known for it, but is there anything you can share with regard to that?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you've got to say that the independent sector is full of entrepreneurs. That it is a sector for entrepreneurialism. And what you've seen is retailers working, 18 hours a day, getting into their cars to deliver for those who cannot access the shops. I mean, that's a very important point. So I said comfortably over 1 million delivery slots. And I think what you should note is a lot of those delivery slots would have been specifically for those who are vulnerable, rather than, them putting a bunch of delivery slots open on a website that, anyone can access. They would have put on a delivery slot for someone that said, I need some help, please. And, they've been real heroes in relation to this. And, I know the government keeps talking about supermarket workers, but please, the supermarket workers definitely includes the independent retailers. They're supermarket workers too. It's just a definitional misunderstanding, let's say. And, you're also seeing retailers who are making and delivering care packs to the NHS, to care workers, essential workers generally, delivering sandwiches, even to their local supermarkets as well. So you've seen some fantastic entrepreneurialism and giving support to food banks, helping the homeless. Every day we hear reports of more extraordinary things.
And without wishing to change the tone on it, I mean, that's the good side of it. There is, and you alluded to it a few minutes ago, there is a small cohort of retailers who've sought to perhaps profiteer from this and seen it as an opportunity. What would your message be to those retailers?
My message is simple. Obviously, there's no excuse for profiteering from this crisis, and I've made it very clear to all our partners, and we cannot really accept any predatory pricing. But we also need to be clear, there is a difference between predatory pricing and the withdrawal of promotional programs. And the withdrawal of promotional programs comes from manufacturers because fundamentally in certain product groupings, they do not want to stimulate demand further because of availability issues. But some consumers have been conditioned to promotions and see it as normal pricing. So that's probably part of the issue. But I would say on this point, it's a great shame that the actions of a relatively small minority has been focused upon in the media. And as opposed to highlighting the amazing work that the majority are doing, I think it's really important for the media to focus on that rather than, the actions of the small minority.
Absolutely. And wholesale has always been a robust sector. So I guess my final question is sort of looking to the future and how the channel is kind of going to come out of this. Do you feel optimistic for the future or do you have a note of pessimism for where we're going to be in a year's time or so?
I think I would say optimistic. I think convenience or local retailing has had an unbelievable opportunity to reconnect with the communities they serve, and for those communities to really appreciate and value their local store. I also believe that going forward, because we're going to be entering a very tough economic environment, that more people will actually opt to shop local, because obviously, if you're traveling to shop elsewhere, that has other expenses associated with it. I think it's really important for suppliers and manufacturers to understand that you can't really talk about convenience versus the main shop anymore. I think you need to talk about local shops and big shops, and fundamentally the consumer is looking for the same value in either location. And if that's enabled by our supply chains, why not? I think also as the catering and on-trade sectors restart, it's going to be very tough. You're going to see reduced footfall and demand in those sectors. So I think they're going to be actually managing their cash flows as well. And that may point towards a collect model, which again is good for cash and carry and wholesale. Okay, well, Dawood, thank you so much for giving me the time and for so much insight. I really appreciate it. Thank you. It's a pleasure, Tanya. See you soon.